Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to this session of the 2024 edition of This is Film Heritage in Practice. My name is Aslı Özgen. I'm Assistant Professor of Media and Culture at the University of Amsterdam, specifically working on diasporic audiovisual heritage, and I'm the new Scholar in Residence at iFilm Museum. I'll be hosting today's session. This is Film is a collaborative effort that kicked off back in 2015 when iFilm Museum, the University of Amsterdam, and Amsterdam School for Cultural Analysis came together. We're excited to have today 26 students joining us as part of This is Film class, and they will be assisting in introducing our guests and posing questions throughout the series. The sessions are recorded, and they will be made available online, just like in the past editions. So you can find the recordings of the previous sessions of the previous years on the YouTube channel. So this year's focus is on the theme, presenting audiovisual collections, experiments and explorations, which aligns with the International Conference happening later this year. With more than 40 speakers from around the world, the conference will delve into the exploration and experimentation of audiovisual collection presentation. It will spotlight emerging formats that extend beyond the confines of traditional film theaters and curatorial frameworks, fostering novel avenues for public engagement and accessibility. This encompasses, for example, immersive, participatory, and multi-screen formats, as well as alternative presentation models leveraging emerging technologies or inventive low-tech and do-it-yourself approaches. The 9th International Conference will take place from May 26 through May 28. Registration is already open and program will be published shortly. Today's session will focus on Pan-African film, and we are very honored to have our guests, June Givanni, film curator and founder of PanAfrican Cinema Archive, and researcher Nikolaus Perneczky. Now, as the format of these sessions go, if you have been to earlier sessions, you'd know, I would like to present This is Film students assigned for this session. Could you perhaps wave to our audience Rebecca Hassi, İlkim Kabız, Doris Noy, and Alia Yumrukçal, who unfortunately couldn't join us today. Well, on behalf of the group, Rebecca Hassi and Doris Noy will introduce our guests, and then we will move on to our conversation. So, Rebecca and Doris, please, the floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. Dr. June Givanni is a leading film curator, writer, archivist, and programmer working in African and African diaspora cinema and Black British culture and heritage. A pioneer in the field, June has over 40 years of experience in the film and broadcasting industry. June has worn many hats. In 1983, she was the coordinator of the Third Eye Film Festival in London. In 1992, during her time at the British Film Institute, June established and headed the African Caribbean unit. In the 1990s, she also co-founded and co-edited the Black Film Bulletin, a magazine that offered a space for critical commentary regarding developments in new Black cinema and Pan-African cinema histories. As a programmer, June has programmed for festivals around the world, including the Kerala Film Festival, the Planet Africa at the Toronto International Film Festival, the Colors of the Nile Film Festival in Ethiopia, and the Africa Film Festival in Nigeria, just to name a few. In addition, June has published books titled Remote Control, Dilemmas of Black Intervention in British Film and Television, and Symbolic Narratives / African Cinema, Audiences, Theory, and the Moving Image. And of course, June is the founder of the June Givanni Pan-African Cinema Archive. The development of the archive is based on her personal collections over her years of working in cinema. The self-curated UK-based archive of films and film-related materials is focused on curating and promoting African and African diaspora cinema and Black British culture and heritage. The archive has amassed over 10,000 items, including films, manuscripts, audio, photography, posters, and more, and is an invaluable resource. Most recently, June was the recipient of the BAFTA's Outstanding British Contribution to Cinema Award, recognizing her pioneering work in the preservation, presentation, and celebration of African and African diaspora cinema. And as you can probably tell, June's contribution to the documentation, promotion, distribution, and exhibition of Black film is nothing short of outstanding. It is truly an honor to have you here with us today. Please welcome Dr. June Givanni.
Nikolaus Perneczky, a Leverhulme Early Career Fellow at Queen Mary University of London, is interested in the interplay between film, colonialism, and development. His academic journey is characterized by his commitment to uncovering the complexities of post-independence West Africa's filmmaking landscape, while also being critical of prevailing narratives of development. He dismantles fixed notions of development, foregrounding African cinema as a compelling vehicle for envisioning alternative worlds and challenging hegemonic structures. Perneczky's current scholarly endeavors are propelled by his dedication to decolonizing global film heritage. Through restitution, Perneczky uncovers the layers of uneven development and unequal exchange that continue to permeate global archival practices. His work serves as a call for a reevaluation of existing power dynamics and a collaborative effort towards rectifying historical injustices ingrained within the constitution of film preservation. Perneczky and Givanni have a podcast together called the PanAfrican Cinema Podcast. The podcast has recently been relaunched and now includes a host of different series. In this new format, the podcast is produced by June Givanni herself and her team made up of Benjamin Pollock, Dimalola Lemomu, Phoebe Beckett Chingono, Phoeven Haley, and by Nikolaus Perneczky himself. Thank you all for being here today, and please welcome both June Givanni and Nikolaus Perneczky.
Great, wonderful. Thank you for the introductions. Well, thank you for being here. It's a true honor to have you both with us today to talk about especially the June Givanni Pan-African Cinema Archive.
Quite a mouthful.
It is.
Sometimes say JPACA.
JGPACA. JGPACA. So, June, could you please tell us a little bit about how the archive started and what it contains?
Well, hi everyone. Quite a number of you here. Oh, hi. See some familiar faces here. Yeah, the archive started, I was a curator, a programmer and a curator for many years. And this was in the early 80s, as been stated. And right through until, I would say, obviously the mid-90s, when the internet came into being, it was all pre-digital. It's analog material that you're collecting in different forms. And because I was actually working with Pan-African Cinema, that is across a number of continents. I was based in the UK, but I worked with Third Cinema, as was mentioned at the beginning. And that covered a number of continents. And within the work that I was doing in different places, we were also using materials in different languages. So Image Caribe Film Festival in Martinique, the Pan-African Film Festival of Ouagadougou in Burkina Faso from '85 was the first time that I went to that festival. And we were collecting, I was collecting materials as a curator for my own knowledge and the service of taking that material to different spaces and presenting it to different audiences. And I mentioned the fact of different languages because people often wonder why I have so many scripts in the archive. We've got scripts in the archive and transcripts and things like that. And it was to do with actually helping the filmmakers, also putting them in contact with potential funders or people that might fund their project. And that was the case when you're moving between different territories. like I'd be meeting with filmmakers whose work I then take to the Toronto International Film Festival, for example. And there I know a lot of the industry people will want to not only know about the films and the filmmakers, but also what's coming next and what they might do, or taking films from the English-speaking Africa and the Caribbean to Martinique at the Image Caribe Film Festival. And there, especially within the pre-digital era, and when we were taking 16 and 35 millimeter films, films that weren't, in distribution as such, so they hadn't yet been fully subtitled, or they hadn't been subtitled, but they were important to show. And so what that festival used to do would be electronic subtitling as they project the film. So they would ask me to provide scripts and transcripts. So in those situations, that would be... So there were a whole range of reasons why I was collecting different elements related to the films and to their projection in different territories. I mean, that's just one example of what that was about.
Yeah, just to add to this, perhaps that for people who don't know precisely what kinds of items you would find in the archive. So you mentioned scripts, there's films, there's audio recordings with interviews with various filmmakers from all parts of Africa and the African diaspora. There are publications, books and journals, the whole print run of the Black Film Bulletin, which you edited. A lot of the materials are connected to your own work in one way or another. So it's a community archive that is globe spanning in its remit, but includes so many important chapters, not just of African cinema, as you said, but also Caribbean cinema, Black British cinema, all the work you did in the 1980s for the Greater London Council, anti-racist film programming, really sort of pioneering work. It's all there in the archive. So there's a whole trove of like history as it actually happened, but also of potential history, scripts that weren't made into films. It's massive.
Yes, it is. There's quite a lot there, and of course, the thing is, a lot of the photographs in the archive are photographs that I took at that time in different constituencies and different festivals and places, whether it's the Havana Film Festival or again Burkina Faso or wherever else. And those are now part of the archive. And the audio interviews that I did with various people, both in the UK but also internationally. And the thing is, at the time you're collecting this stuff, you are collecting it, as I said, because it becomes my own currency for what I was doing in the pre-digital age. But of course, you keep this because then you are able to share it in different contexts of presenting the films, but also to share it with others and to keep it as a resource for other people to know about and to see. And that was part of it, but it wasn't my starting point. So
a large number of rare, very beautiful film posters as well. You should mention.
Yes, a lot of film posters. And there's one in particular that actually carries. It's very dear to my heart because it was given to me by a filmmaker who, in Burkina Faso, the first time I went, a Somali filmmaker. Because the thing is, in recent years, people don't understand what Somalia is and was, and they would never imagine that the Mogadishu Film Week was such an important thing at its time. I think it only ran for 2 or 3 editions, but the fact that there was a Mogadishu Film Week and it was very active time for that country, culturally active. And so many generations subsequent to that will only know Mogadishu and Somalia in the context of, you know, some of the bad press that it's had in the years. It's more than pirates. It's you know, it's an actively had an active and vibrant culture, and these things are important, and these are what things that archives can do to give people a better understanding of where things come from, because it's the journey, I think, the cultural journey that I think is important, and that you don't have unless you have archives, you have images, you have things that challenge the prejudices that people have now, and can actually understand and explore territories that have a history that says something else.
And I guess Mogadishu is also important as a sort of corrective to many African film histories, which, at least in the past, were very much centered on North and West Africa.
Yes.
And I mean, and East Africa was sort of a lesser concern. This has changed more recently, but
yes.
But it's so there's
yes, definitely.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely.
June, you mentioned the memory function of the archive, and I know that quite a lot of work has been done recently to reach out to younger audiences and sort of engage them more actively with the archive. I'm also, I want to hear more about how did you meet? So when was it that Nikolaus, you found out about the archive, and how was this collaboration just came into being?
Yeah, so I think the first time we met was about 10 years ago, just before I started my PhD project, which was concerned with West African filmmaking of the post-independence period, as was mentioned in the introduction. And I came to donate a book to which I had contributed a chapter. I'd heard about the archive somewhere, I don't remember where, and I just came to bring this book. And June was at the time still at a community center. June's archive was at the time at a community center in Stockwell, which is in South London, close to Brixton.
I should say it wasn't an archive at the time, because I'd been collecting for years, and a lot of the stuff was in my house, and then I'd put it into storage that I was paying for separately, and then couldn't afford to do that anymore. And also I needed to go through all the collections, and I didn't have the space. And luckily I found a community centre between Brixton and Stockwell, and they offered me a room, which is actually a storeroom, but I turned it into my base. And we do have some images of that before, but that's where I was, and it was myself and whoever was coming there, who was interested to volunteer and to help. And Nick was a star part of that.
But it was very closely linked also to the local community. Yes. Lots of people from Cape Verde, I think, so you were screening. You put on screening programs there. So there was a whole curatorial archival practice that was already very lively. In Stockton, but then I don't know what year precisely, but some years later you found a new home in central London at Mayday Rooms.
Yes. We were at Stockwell for quite a few years, because in 2014, when we did our movements exhibition, that was the first of the bigger exhibitions, that was done at University of the Arts London. And the co-curators with me of that one was the artist Sonia Boyce and the professors Paul Goodwin, and that was done at the galleries at Chelsea College of Art, and Sonia used to come to the community centre. A lot of people, academics are really, really good at sort of searching people out. And they used to come there to this community centre in Brixton to find me and to see what we're doing and offer collaborations. And Sonia was one of the people that used to come there. And then they said, well, you know, and Sonia and David Bailey, they used to run an archive themselves at one point, and they were interested in having a show of our archive at Chelsea College of Art. So we started to do that, and that was it was a show that ran for about 3 weeks, and it was also held at Birkbeck. One of my co-directors of the archive is Dr. Emma Sandon, who's a senior lecturer at Birkbeck University, and the other co-director of the archive is the filmmaker Imru Bakari, who was the founder of the Chedo Film Workshop. And so the exhibition, the first big exhibition that we did, moving on beyond the community centre, was at Birkbeck. And that is just to say that we were in a small space doing what we were doing there, and people came to find us and were interested in what we're doing and offered the space. So we went to Birkbeck and were there, and then more people got to know about us, and including the university sector, and they were connected to a space on Fleet Street in the centre of London called Mayday Rooms. It's a building that actually houses many different types of archives, and they gave us a space for a year, and we turned it into, how long has it been now? That was since 2015, so it's like nearly 9 years. But we've been in that space now for some time. We've actually grown out of the space, but at the moment we can't yet move to a bigger space.
It's maybe worth saying a word about Mayday Room and what kind of space it is. It's an archive of left movements, and also a left organizing space, independently run. It also it houses an organization called State Watch. It houses Kaiwu, an important migrant union in London, and it houses June's archive. So there are very many, I think, relevant overlaps also perhaps in their approach, which is to link these link their archive to contemporary, to current struggles.
Yes, it is. And in fact, they believe in telling history from below. And when we moved to that archive, the very first screening that we hosted, and that they were very keen to be part of, it was a film by one of the filmmakers whose work was in our archive at the time. It was a film made by H.O. Nazareth, and it was a discussion between C.L.R. James and E.P. Thompson, the philosopher and the person who believes in that telling history from below. And so Mayday Rooms were very pleased about that connection, and we held this joint screening. And it was a great opportunity because we actually managed to get, and the film only existed in 16 millimeter, so we had to get an archive. I think it was Lux or who would bring the 16 mil. And it goes back. It was so nostalgic that the room was packed with people who wanted to sit in a room with a 16 millimeter projector whirring in the background, and it actually worked very well. And people were very happy to be able to see that film in that context with C.L.R. James and E.P. Thompson discussing. It was called Talking History, and it was made by H.O. Nazareth.
I mean, perhaps, unless you have another question for us, one more word on the evolution of the archive, which I think is worth lingering on. So a lot has changed, really, since I first met you 10 years ago. For a long time, we've been trying to obtain small funds, sort of project-based funding, essentially, that would only ever cover the costs of one particular endeavor, and then we would try to strategize to branch some of that off towards overhead. But it was kind of very piecemeal, piecing things together. And more recently, you've received a substantial funding, which has allowed you to employ project assistants, not just volunteers, which I think has created a new kind of continuity.
Yes, it's the first time we've had a grant that is to do with supporting our existence, because everything else was to do, as Nick says, with project-specific small projects. And this is the first time we've had a grant from the Freelands Foundation, which gives us, it's one amount, but we've spread it over 2 years to make it stretched. But we have two staff appointments. One is the coordinator of the archive, Damilola Lemume, who was mentioned, and the other one is a job share between two assistants in the archive. That's Phoebe and Benjin. And we are very glad to have that, because it's been very difficult to develop such a physical archive without staffing. And although our ambition and what we've tried to do as we go along is to organize it in such a way to make it available, to make it searchable, and that is one of our biggest ambitions. It's something that we're still moving to, and we are getting there. And that involves getting the cataloguing right, which has been we've been undertaking for quite some time, and also putting it online so people can at least search it online. Because for the moment, we are available for people to come and visit, and we do organize exhibitions and screenings. And with the new staff, they're young people, they're very enthusiastic, they come with a lot of skills, and even just for the few months that they've been there, they organize screenings more regularly in the building, and our screenings are always free, and they always organize exhibitions, small displays of material from the archive at that time, whenever there's a screening. And those, we're finding ways to take the archive to people, and to have young people with that enthusiasm is really a blessing.
I mean, I can listen to you for forever, but I'm just looking at the audience, maybe if there are any questions. I want to move on to discussing the exhibition in a bit. So if you have exhibition-related questions, hold it for now, but any other question is now welcome. Yes, there is one question there.
Yeah, I wonder if, do you run like a distribution service actually of the films that you have in the archive?
Well, we don't have a distribution service as such, but we have, I mean, there are many things we can talk about. I suppose the one that is the most prominent, I would say, has been something that we did in 2020. 2020 was the 50th anniversary of a film that was made by the Ghanaian filmmaker Nikolaus Perneczky. It's a film called You Hide Me, and he got into the British British Museum and made that film in 1970. And we had the tape of it. Kwate knew we had it, and he said to us, well, look, you know, it's going to be 20 years, what can we do? But of course, COVID hit. We were planning all sorts of elaborate major things to mark this moment. COVID hit. And so what we did was a webinar series. And that was really quite important, because it was discussing this idea of restitution of African art. But one of the panels we had was restitution of moving image as well, which hadn't really come into the restitution debate. So that was something that was also part of it. And we had a panel with Jihan El Tahri, with Kwate himself, with
Jean-Marie Thénault,
Jean-Marie Thénault, and what's his name from
Ali Essafi from Morocco.
Yeah, and anyway, but there were a number, and I'm sure that you'll be able to find that online as well. But that was quite important, and these things come through people who know the archive, and who we've been in contact with and worked together at different stages and in different times, and that who have confidence and actually turn to me to help them make it present out there, put it out there in a context. And of course, because we deal with so many other people who were also part of that, we have links to SOAS, where they give me a doctorate some time ago. So we had the context for presenting it and actually discussing it with a whole range of constituencies of interest.
On that note, I think it's maybe interesting for people to know that unlike some larger archives, the relationship that you have to the people whose work you hold is not just a legal one, but also personal, and so is the responsibility that you carry towards these items. So whereas a big institution might just say, well, we have the rights and we have the print, so we will show it. You would never do anything without sort of prior informally consultation. I think that's a kind of an important distinction in the modus operandi of the archive. And one thing I just wanted to also mention in response to the question about distribution, you have viewing stations and people can watch some of the films that you have in the archive if they make an appointment.
Yes, people can come in, and we encourage especially a lot of younger people. Because we have schools and youth groups, and so coming to the archive. And of course, people come from different countries. We've got somebody from Morocco next week. The Cubans were there with us the week before, because the thing is, and quite big institutions who don't have some of the things that I've kept from that time, because I've been going to the Havana Film Festival since '84. And so I keep that stuff. And of course, Havana Film Festival has a massive archive. But the thing is, what they maybe don't have is sort of the personal view of it at that time, and the sort of things that I would have recorded and the photographs I would have taken. But some of us, not only myself, but others in the UK, of that, who had that experience. So it was interesting for them to come and for us to discuss with ICAIC what that relationship was and how it relates to things like the Image Carib Film Festival, because that was a regional movement as well.
And perhaps one addendum to the question of digitization, which you mentioned earlier, and the perennial quest to digitize the catalog, make it openly accessible. I feel there's like a tension there in a way for the kind of archive that you are running, because digitizing it, making it available in a way can at least also runs the risk of decontextualizing it in a way. And it is your personal journey that has led to the accumulation of these materials, and it is your knowledge that holds them together, that can establish different threads between them. It's maybe hard to relay that into a catalog.
Possibly, but I do see it as, because there are so many people, especially younger people now, who are on that same journey. I did it obviously some time ago. But, and in fact, one of the things I should mention is a great film that I've seen recently by Alain Cassanda, Coconut Head Generation, which is a phenomenal film by this young Nigerian filmmaker, and it's shot at the Ibadan University, and it's a film group that they have there. They watch films from all over the African diaspora, and so. But it also has a very powerful. It becomes a very powerful forum for discussing where they are, what they're facing as young people, and it is absolutely phenomenal. And I was so impressed when I saw it. But they are doing something with that now that relates to what is happening now, and it relates to how people are. And then they were in London I think it was Monday, or maybe it was Saturday. Anyway, he came to London and presented it with young Nigerian filmmakers in London at that time. And the thing is, there are so many different ways in which archive is seen and can be seen, because they were looking at Pan-African cinema in their university, but they were actually discussing what their situation was as well. And then he really crafted that film very well together and is taking it around to many other diasporas and to many other parts of the Pan-African world. And people are experiencing that. So I think it's true to an extent, but I think obviously we would like it to serve many different purposes. So it is important for people to be able to see it. And it's, and we have to see how we can best make that possible. It doesn't, it's for us, it has a narrative and it has a broad scope of interest, but I think it's important that other people see what their ways are, what their interest is within that, because I think archives should be living things, and the people on this generation will also be able to present it to the next generation with the perspective of what it meant now, and in terms of what they're doing.
Absolutely. Maybe we could mention a little bit about the exhibition that took place last year at Raven Row, because that's also one way, has been, I think, an effective way of activating the archive, as you just mentioned. So how was it, like putting all this multi-format, multilingual material into an exhibition space? Could you please tell us how the process was like?
Exhausting. The movements one that I mentioned before was the first time we did something like that, and that was already quite big from our starting point. And the movements one, I should also say, included a whole weekend of discussion events at Birkbeck around the whole negritude movement, and it was very good. We had a great panel of people, including Sonia, including John Akomfra, including Uzan Palsi, a number of people all discussing this whole negritude movement, but also questions of memory and history. So that was one of the things. But sorry, what was your question?
For Per Ank,
the Per Ank, yeah. Sorry. Yes, the big one. This was the biggest exhibition we'd had, and we're very, very grateful to Raven Row Galleries. It's a very popular gallery. It's known for its quality of exhibitions, its choice. It's always a lot of thought and based on ideas, and it's known for that. And so when we were able to discuss with them the possibility of showcasing our archive, it was wonderful. And they said, oh, yes, we've got 8 galleries and, we can choose a few and see where it would best fit in. But we had all 8 galleries. It's 2 buildings together. And it was a very big endeavor. And they have been very, very supportive in this. We had a number of rooms. We had a room downstairs with... where we did a little pop-up pop-up archive, pop-up version of our archive. We had a lot of major framed posters from the archive in the different spaces, but also along the stairs. And so we had a library, a beautiful library space with a lot of publications. And there are images of these. Yes, we had a room that was just dedicated to the first work of Black Audio Film Collective, John Akumfa and the Black Audio Film Collective team. It was their Signs of Empire, Images of Nationality. And this was an installation in itself in a separate gallery. We had what's called film lounges that were set up in the major downstairs space on different themes. So one of them was Black on Europe, which is a series that was done on Channel 4 television some years ago. And this was a series about just before the EEC became the EU, and Britain was considering whether it was going to join or not. And a number of, one of my, actually people that I've worked with over the years were involved in making that series, one of which was made here in Holland and included my good friend, I don't think he's here this evening, Felix de Roy, who you guys would know, and others were the main commentators. It was excellent. And so we presented that, and we presented a number of things in this film lounge context where you can see things related to each other. And we had a major artwork from the Chimurenga art group that a lot of people will know. It took over a wall as big as, bigger than that screen. It would be like, it was very large. And and we had discussions every Thursday evening with invited guests, internationally invited guests, and every Saturday evening we were presenting a new feature film, a feature film from the archive. So there was, but my favorite room was the sound room. We had a sound room where we'd put a range of the recorded sounds and interviews and from various contexts. And I loved that room because it was quite a small room with great sound, two beautiful speakers. But you walk into the room and you could choose on the key what you'd like to listen to. But it wasn't with headphones. The sound was ambient and it was quality. And I would always take people up there and I would always play the Harry Belafonte voice because I recorded him speaking at the Havana Film Festival he used to go there in the 84, 85, and he was talking about cultural détente. This was, I don't know how many years after the Bay of Pigs, but he would always go to the Havana Film Festival. And when you walk into this room of ambient sound and you hear Harry Belafonte, once you get over the fact of his great voice and you actually hear what he's saying, it is wonderful. It's wonderful. And I'm so glad that we were able to have that room. I also have, for instance, we also played a wonderful song made by the brother of Jibril Diop Mambiti, Wasis Diop, who's a known singer. And he did an album called Judebek. And one track on that album is dedicated to Jibril. And it's called Ange Jibril. And it's beautiful. And when you hear these, you walk into that room and you hear these things. So anyway, so you get a sense there was a lot of scope and diversity in presenting what an archive can be.
I'm looking at the audience if there are any questions for June or Nick. There is one in the back.
Thank you very much. Maybe two questions back to back. Going from a very personal archive to a more public one now, how does it change? Like people reaching out to you to donate pieces to your archive. So if you could talk a little bit about this, and secondly, by your experience, how does the presence of archive changing the political landscape, cinematic political landscape in UK?
How is that last bit again?
The presence of the archive changing the political landscape in UK for a film scene.
Right. Well, definitely it is changing, and there are lots of questions being asked. Of course, because I was doing this in a pre-digital age, there were all sorts of decisions that were made then that maybe not relevant now, but also, so many things have changed. Because when we are looking at, for instance, the panel that we had on restitution of the moving image, the question you were thinking, well, how does that work? But there are other elements that have changed. So, for instance, one of the filmmakers spoke about having to pay the producers of a film she made for the use of some footage that she used from that film. She wanted to use it in a new film, but that footage was footage she shot, but she was going to be asked to, and that's because the producer was the person that received the finance. I think in that case it was French money that went towards the film, and that person now has the rights, and so this question of who owns the rights and for what, and who has access to it. Of course, there are all questions of, I would say, integrity about things like that. But it's a real muddy area for the way things have changed and who is. It's just that archives have become so much more crucial, and people are seeing them in a different way, and sometimes the people who have been the main makers, architects, are the people that are losing out because there are so many different levels of interest now around them, including big institutional archives. As I said, most of the material I keep and have gathered over the years have been in relation to people that I've worked with. And as you know, some people come to the archive to get a copy of their films that they don't actually have themselves, and that things like that. So it depends, but the terrain has changed a lot because archives are now so important. People are recognizing their significance, and they're big business.
Just an anecdote on this, perhaps. I mean, I think for some larger context, I also think that because many big public archives, including audiovisual archives, have been defunded, subject to budget cuts during decades of neoliberal austerity, they have been additionally incentivized to, in some ways, monetize their holdings, or at least charge fees for all kinds of services that they may provide. And Quate's film "You Hide Me," which June has done much to recirculate, existed as quite a bad VHS rip in June's archive. But that is the way in which this film was rediscovered some years back during COVID, and in which it found a new global audience, while there is also a pristine copy, a pristine print of the film being held by a big brick and mortar archive whose name shall not be mentioned.
We won't mention it.
Yeah.
but it's, you know, and there's and sometimes the history towards these things is quite complex because, you know, there are times when things were quite difficult for the filmmakers, and if, you know, like so many films made by Nigerian filmmakers or Ghanaian filmmakers that were being developed in labs in a country that we all know that were being developed, and then what happened
in the UK, in France, in other former imperial centers.
But what was happening within those countries was they had a big devaluation of the currency, and although they had sent their films to be developed in those labs, because of the devaluation, they were never able to get them back. And that has been a big problem. And you've got their children or the generations below them now trying very hard to raise the money to get these films and so back, some of which are still with those labs. And when because the whole thing about labs going out of business meant that they would move from lab to lab to lab. So even tracking where they are has become an issue. But it's a very big subject at the moment, and it's one that is quite complex, but it's one worth pursuing, I think.
The other question, I think, was about like how to donate stuff.
Oh, yes.
Maybe the gentleman has something in mind.
Yes, please do. Please do. We do try as much as possible, and to donate is, first of all, to contact us. And we do try as much as possible to discuss with the donor what it is they would like to happen, to see. We would try to see where it fits in with the archive. There's very little that we have refused because sometimes things are not necessarily the best quality, but the material, what it includes, can sometimes be useful beyond the cinematic world or beyond the audiovisual world, because a lot of people who come to our archive actually come to research a historical or a geographic or series of ideas, because of course archives and what they hold are also very much not custodian, but they're locations for ideas and how things were being discussed, how things were being presented in a different era. And so whether it's historians or art, somebody who's interested in the artistic dimension of what is covered. There are so many different type users for archives, and that is why I think we try and keep it as broad as possible, and try to provide that resource for as many people as possible. So, I mean, it's really a discussion with the donor about what they would like to see happen, and us in terms of, we could also sell it to them and say, well, this would work perfectly in this context because this is what we have and this is where it fits into what we think is a useful resource for people wishing to use archives. And we work, of course, a lot with young people and with students, school children as well.
Mm-hmm. We're running out of time, so I already
my answers.
I also have a lot of questions, but I want to move on to the screening for today. So the films you chose for us from your archive, could you please tell us briefly about the films that we will see? So we'll see You Hide Me, which was already mentioned.
Yes.
So that's great opportunity for all of us. What else did you choose?
We can.
So I guess the idea for this program was to extend some of the work we've been doing on this question of African film heritage and restitution. the series of online roundtables that we hosted, that June hosted and I helped organize during COVID, was, as June mentioned, centered around You Hide Me. So that's sort of the starting point. And then we move on to Statues Hardly Ever Smile, which is a film by Chamber Productions. It's a kind of I guess an alternative, as we conceive it, to the more famous Statues Also Die, which the title, of course, is a riff on. It's from a different. It also deals with objects in a museum and the question of their subjectivity, their animatedness, but from a different perspective that we found really productive and interesting. The film also belongs to a very interesting production context of Black US filmmaking that is not so well known, though I think it is being rediscovered.
Pearl Bowser was part of that at that time, who was also somebody that worked a lot with archives.
And the other films in the program, which are Ahmed Bouanani's Mémoire 14, Suleiman Elnour's Africa, the Jungle, Drums and Revolution, and Onyeka Igwe's No Archive Can Restore You, are all archival films that in some way, that I guess seek to reappropriate the colonial archive in different ways, and I suppose the underlying assumption or the underlying idea that we would like to convey with this is that African archival film and filmmakers are African archival filmmaking is actually a really important site of this struggle for the return of moving images, both in that these filmmakers are materially reappropriating these materials, but they're also asking what it takes to welcome back images that may objectify, that may dehumanize, that may traumatize. I think there's quite a big range of attitudes that you find in the films that we've chosen. Some of them are more optimistic about the possibilities of reappropriation. Others, I think especially Onyeka's film, less so. I think her project, as I would describe it, definitely has a strong sort of abolitionist bent. It's also, I think it also poses the question whether perhaps we should at some point leave this colonial archive. She doesn't show us those images. She creates like a layer of opacity between us and them. So I think that's in very broad strokes.
And Onyeka's been working with our archives since her own journey in this direction in terms of filmmaking and working with archives.
Yes,
and
all the films have a link to the archive in one way or another.
Yes. And I suppose linked to that is the clip that we will show.
Do we have time for that though? I wonder.
Was it? Oh, it was going to be now.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to...
Oh, we're not going to be able to show it.
I don't think so.
Oh, it's quite short.
We can show it tomorrow as part of the seminar.
Sorry for you guys who won't be here tomorrow. And I must really, there's some faces in the audience who have been on this journey with me for a long time. There's Yolanda, who's, because I've worked a lot with people here. I'm not sure if Mariette is here. And I did invite Felix de Roy, who I really wished would have been here, but he may not have been able to make it now. But, everywhere I go, there's been people who have been part of this journey, and I really thank them from the bottom of my heart for their support.
Thank you, June, for for being here, for all the work that you have done, and for sharing with us the valuable material from the archive. We're very happy to be able to see them today.
Thank you for inviting us.
Of course, unfortunately, we don't have time to talk about the films, just like they do in Coconut Head Generation. So just keep them with you and talk to other people about these films, and maybe tell them to look up June Givanni Pan-African Cinema Archive, and maybe visit sometime.
Definitely.
Spread the word. Thank you for being here. Please join me once again to thank our guests, June and Nikolaus.
And thank you. Thank you to the eye.
Of course. We'll move on to the screening now.